Claire Oosterhuis here with RealAgriculture.com. It is Monday. It seems like all week you talk about how the week's flying by, but the weekend flies by just as quick. So we're back here again, and I'm very excited to have you here along today. For today's conversation on Real Ag Live, as always, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, or YouTube. Wherever you're at, we are happy to have you here. So thanks for tuning along. And today I have here with me Mark Brock of Hensel, Ontario. How is it going?
I'm good, Kara. How are you?
I'm doing good. So we were chatting a bit before here. Some people may know Mark's wife, Sandy. She is very popular on the YouTube world, especially when it comes to her sheep. So they're just getting into some lambing season over here, but you are more on the cropping side of things. Where are we at in the growing season in Ontario? Any chance of getting, I mean, ground's still frozen, but what's it look like?
Actually, a little bit of field work got done this morning with frozen ground. So we lost all our snow last week in a very quick melt. And we're looking at assessing our winter wheat crop right now. I have some winter canola that I'm kind of keeping an eye on to see how it's fared through winter. So we got the itch to start driving around and looking at fields. So the pickup trucks are slowing down and we're kind of swerving all over as we look out the side windows. So it's that time of year.
Absolutely. So you were a 2019 Nuffield Scholar. Do you want to talk? I mean, there's lots of things we can talk about within that, but
Sure.
first of all, what is a Nuffield Scholar for somebody who may not know?
Sure. So a Nuffield Scholar is basically a scholarship, or I guess basically something that's awarded to a person by Nuffield Canada. So depending on how many sponsors Nuffield Canada has at the time, 2019 was the year I did it. So there was 5 scholars that had sponsorships from different organizations. Mine was actually sponsored by the Grain Farmers of Ontario. And I applied to Nuffield Canada as a hopeful scholar with an idea around a topic, and went through a selection process. And basically, at the end of it, was awarded a scholarship based on my topic of farmer to farmer collaboration. So, if you're at all interested to know more about Nuffield Canada, their web site is nuffield.ca. A lot of past reports are there. Mine, when it's officially published, which is probably in the next week or two, will be live there on Nuffield Canada's webpage. So if you're curious about it, just hop over to the website and take a look.
And Lindsay's saying hi, Mark. I know Mark was on the agronomist a couple weeks ago, so it's great we're able to have him on Real Ag Live as well. So, what got you interested in being a Nuffield Scholar? What kind of started that process for you?
So I've actually had the pleasure of meeting a few different Canadian Nuffield scholars over the number of years. So when I got my involvement with the Grain Farmers of Ontario as a director on that provincial board there in Ontario for, I guess, 9 years, and chair for 3 of it, I got to know a lot of people across Canada, and a lot of those opportunities to meet people. I bumped in a couple of Nuffield scholars, and I just found it really intriguing. What you have to do with a Nuffield scholarship is actually travel the world basically for 10 weeks. That's kind of the minimum travel commitment. And of that, a good portion of that, I think 6 weeks is supposed to be continuous. Um, so, it's a pretty big commitment to do that. And talking to people and hearing their stories about traveling and meeting people, I just thought it was a really cool opportunity. And of those people that I met, that are Canadian scholars, they invited other, country scholars to our farm, and I got to meet people from Ireland, New Zealand, different countries. So it just kind of got me interested to maybe pursue it and kind of try to take on a scholarship myself.
So what's the process like of deciding where do you get to decide where you're going to travel, or is that decided based on your topic of choosing?
So the only kind of real requirement on traveling is that every scholar year, in 2019, I had to go to the Temporary Scholars Conference. So it's where you meet all the scholars from around the world. And so that you have to go to that, no choice. So it moves around the world, basically, kind of countries that are involved with Nuffield scholarships. But mine was in the U.S. in Iowa. So I went there for 12 days and got to meet 72, I believe, other scholars from around the world. And so that's the only requirement you have. After that, it's free reign, and you just kind of figure out a path and a journey and figure out how it's going to help your topic. There's our opportunities to do. The country of Australia actually does organized global focus tours, they call them. And it's a 6-week continuous travel that you can do with the Australians. They have to do one of these, and same with scholars from New Zealand. But the invite goes out to Canadians and other scholars as well. But I didn't do that. I kind of focused more on where I wanted to go and around my topic.
So where did you obviously you ended up going. So where did you end up going, and what topic did you end up going based on?
So I really focused on farmer to farmer collaboration. So the big struggle that I have on our own farm is that, some might not call us mid-sized, but I would define ourselves as a mid-sized farm. So as we look at opportunities to grow, it's becoming a little bit more difficult to have the economies of scale to do some of the investments and improvements that we want to do. So, I think my interest around my topic really came from how can farmers maybe work together and collaborate on capital asset purchases, or even human resource, looking for a shared agronomist or a shared bookkeeper kind of idea, and collaborate that way. It could be peer groups, other things. So that kind of got me really interested in countries that I felt that, from kind of advice from people that were doing stuff like that well, were both Australia and New Zealand. So I spent a month in Australia, and then 2 weeks in New Zealand before COVID kind of wreaked havoc on my travel plans, and we came home. Sandy was there with me as well, so we came home early, but it kind of limited my travel because I was going to go to Europe for 2 weeks, but we just haven't been able to travel. So that kind of was the end of my traveling experience, but it was well worth it. So.
So I mean, obviously within that time you would have learned so many different things and seen so many different things. What would be some of your key takeaways though?
Some of my key takeaways was I have tremendous respect for farmers in general. The tenacity, but Australian farmers, they are, I don't know if they're stubborn or persistent, but or tenacious. But going to visit some of them that had experienced 3 years of drought, seeing sand dunes and fence lines because of wind and in soil erosion, even with zero till, and just the positivity they still had, and how hard they have to work to get what they get out of the soils there. um, I just have a lot of respect for them. And they have no government support programs, nor do New Zealand farmers as well. So this kind of looking at ways to mitigate their own risk. As I said, I have a lot of respect for them. So I think it was just it's really good to get outside your bubble. I would have been very fortunate to be able to get outside of my own bubble from Ontario into around Canada, but to even step out further and have that experience globally with countries like Australia was just I think a phenomenal experience.
So when you were kind of looking at collaborations between people, and especially in Australia, what sorts of things did you find out there that maybe is different from Canada if we were doing that same sort of model?
So the big thing that I ran into with Canadian farmers is every time I kind of brought up my topic around collaborations, I got the that will never work. That will never work. And I got actually quite frustrated with that comment because it's something that I didn't run into in Australia. They seemed to find ways to work together. They didn't have that negative attitude towards a collaboration. They saw value in it. And I guess that was kind of a big key takeaway that I think helped with the development of my report. Was just why are maybe Canadian farmers, or farmers in general, I guess just opposed the idea of collaborations. And it kind of spurred me to get kind of interested in behavioral economics, and how farmers make decisions, and what impacts their decision making process.
So when you're looking at different collaborations, did it matter between sizes of the operations that you were looking at? Did bigger operations collaborate less than smaller ones, or vice versa?
From what I saw in Australia and in New Zealand, there was no barrier to collaborations. You could see small farmers collaborate. A good example would be some farmers I met in a small cotton growing area in Queensland, Australia, where small little groups got together to do like peer learning on best management practices for cotton for that area, because it was kind of geographically different than some other areas in Australia that were growing cotton. So it was pretty interesting to see that small group dynamic there and smaller farmers versus you get into Western Australia, which is huge, very similar to Western Canada, where you'll see 50, 60,000 acre farmers working together on trying to figure out ways to mediate the soil to get more yield. So you saw very large farmers collaborating in Western Canada, or sorry, not Western Canada, Western Australia, and size didn't seem to really matter.
So you talk about how you really, I guess, got an interest with behavioral economics. Do you want to take a step back and define what behavioral economics is to
Sure.
you?
I, it's really hard to define behavioral economics. So really, ultimately, if you were to do like a black and white kind of thing, it's you know, uh, typical economics would be if a price for a product is cheaper, a person's going to buy it no matter what. But when you kind of get to behavioral economics, it's more like, well, it might be cheaper, but is the quality as good? Is this, I had a bad experience last time, so might not buy it. So you start thinking about how some of our biases are impacting the decision making process. And I think that's what's happening with farmers when you start talking about collaborations, is that they've seen one fail or they fear giving up control of a piece of equipment because they have to now, share that control with somebody else. So really behavioral economics to me is kind of the study that really deemed that humans uh, fear loss way more than they feel the opportunity to gain something. So that loss is just of such high value to them that they're so worried about losing it that they will forego any probable gain they could have out of a collaboration. So, it really kind of, this behavioral economics really seemed to impact just the mindset of even going into collaboration, which I found fascinating. And I could have done a whole report on behavioral economics, but I'm an agronomist. I'm not a business person, so I might get called out on some of my theories, but that's kind of an interesting approach I had to it. So I just really feel in my report identify 5 biases that kind of impact farmers' decision making that could, really kind of impact their mindset towards a collaboration, and maybe why some of them view them negatively while others are able to overcome their biases and actually see the positive of collaboration.
So I really find this idea of fearing loss really fascinating too. I mean, maybe it's just because I have an arts degree as well, but it's interesting. And Lindsay here, she's asking, what did you learn about how Canadian farmers make decisions? If there's so much to gain, why do we hesitate? Now, I know you kind of answered this, but can you
Yeah.
dig a bit more into it?
Sure. I'll just use an example as a farm, like just on our own farm, is that you might have grown a certain corn hybrid that you grown for a couple of years, and then you have a windstorm right before harvest, and it all falls down. And it's a one-time deal, but you're so afraid of that experience happening again that you'll forego any other benefit to growing that hybrid that might be, it might be better against vomitoxin, uh, or actually just it's a one-time thing. It won't happen again, and it yields better than the rest by 20 bushels. You'll just forego that advantage because you're so afraid of that corn falling down again. And I think that's the same with the collaboration, is that when I say to talk to farmers about it, I'm like, okay, 2 farmers share a combine or they share ownership of a combine, whose field do they go to first? Is it my field? Is it their field? If it rains, what happens? So already they're going to the negative side of that because they're fearing that they might not get their crop harvested because the person that they're collaborating with got theirs harvested instead. So it's this kind of whole dynamic about fearing this loss that it just kind of forgoes this idea that there could be such a huge benefit to collaboration.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you want to talk a bit too? I know you kind of had an idea with the five biases and what kind of tying into here too. What five biases do you think farmers have when it comes to collaboration?
Oh, I gotta, I'm looking on the side of my screen because I have my report open because I've read it so many times I get lost in it. But really, when you look at biases, there's a lot that just, some of this stuff seems like simple, and some people are maybe going to hear this and say, well, that makes sense. But yeah, it can make sense, but sometimes we have to identify it. So just confirmation bias. I think everyone knows what confirmation bias is that we just get so, we read what we want to read, we confirm what we want to confirm. We just get tied up in this confirmation bias as a, it might be the fact that a farmer will always have John Deere combines or tractors because they just believe it's the best, or case, or whatever. I'm not trying to be brand specific here, but some people just are always going to be John Deere people. The other one is just social biases, and they can be positive or negative. And you know, I like to think of it hopefully as positive, but it's this herd mentality. If you see like 12 people in your area doing cover crops or other things, and you aren't doing that, you might actually feel a little social pressure to start doing some stuff with cover crops. So there's that kind of an impact there. Social proof or influence, how you're influenced by others, is pretty interesting too, that way, which is actually the one I just talked about. The other one I was going to say was a gut feel. You just think quick. It's an emotional decision. As I said about the corn hybrid, you said, I remember that number. It fell down. I'll never grow it again. That's just immediate decision. And I think that happens a lot in farming because, we have to make so many decisions in a day. You just go with gut instinct. Status quo, it's just simpler to do what you've been doing. And I think that has quite a bit of an impact. And then finally, I identify overconfidence bias. Where we feel we're better by ourselves, and that it's hard. We don't see value with adding someone or other people to the equation.
So I don't know a ton about Australian government. I will admit that, but did you see any differences when it comes to support they may have or not have compared to us, and what sort of impacts that had on collaboration needs and wants?
Yeah, so this is going to be maybe a sensitive comment on my side of things, but I'm quite willing to take comments on it or questions. But I find that, and this is kind of just my own theory, that Australian and New Zealand farmers tend to collaborate more because they have zero government support programs. There's no backstop. So because of that, they're really having to find ways to mitigate their risk on farm, whether it's market access or other things. You see the very successful dairy industry in New Zealand because of the work they've done in collaborating around co-ops, cooperatives. Australia, just their ability to do a lot of research that's geographically specific to the region by collaborating and putting money towards stuff like that, by forming really information co-ops, I call it. But so when you look at us in Canada, we have a very individualistic approach to farming. We're kind of in it for ourselves. We do have some government programs. I understand that they might not meet the needs for everybody, and I've been on that journey of lobbying for better or improved business risk management programs. But we still have crop insurance from a crop standpoint. We have that. You have agri stability, you have agri invest. So there's a bit of a backstop there for Canadians. So I question, and it's very similar in the US with some of their farm support programs as well, where I think last year you saw 40% of their income come from farm support programs. So this backstop, I just question, does this backstop actually help us mitigate risk a little bit, that we don't feel we have to collaborate because we're not, I guess, at risk in the marketplace as someone like if you're in Australia or New Zealand where you have no backstop, that you maybe are forced to collaborate a little bit more. So it's a question I pose. I'd be interested in feedback on it, but it's kind of my own thoughts.
And you mentioned how the US is quite individualistic too. Do you think that
Mm-hmm.
has anything oftentimes, when we're watching markets, we're watching things like that. We are watching what's going on in the US. Do you think backstop or not, do you think if the US was different, we would be as well?
Yeah, it's to me, it's naive to think that we're not influenced by U.S. agricultural policy. You know, as a farmer in Ontario, that's row crop, corn, soybeans, winter wheat. I have a lot more in common with a farmer in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan than I do with some in Alberta, Saskatchewan, or Manitoba. But so because of the similar crops and the amount of production that happens, I'm very tied to U.S. policy and how it impacts us here. And I just think because of that, it's hard not to say that we're influenced or have that same kind of mindset that we see, maybe in the U.S. as well. So uh, I just think we tend to be just a little bit more individualistic, and we try to do it on our own. We view, and then one comment I would say is that I found really interesting is that farmers in Canada a lot of times will view their neighbor as a competitor, where if you ask an Australian farmer, they view the world as their competitor. They don't see their neighbor as a competitor. And I've heard that many times from farmers when I traveled in Australia. And I just thought it was a very interesting comment because we don't really see the world as our competitor, it's our neighbor.
Do you see that mentality changing at all? Do you like how can we achieve that sort of ideas here in Canada? Obviously, it's like you said, we have a bunch of different things going on. We have different government programs, but is there anything you see we could be doing that would maybe change that mentality?
Well, I guess my hope is that my if people take time to read my report, it will spark interest in maybe collaborating. Ultimately, I do think we're on the cusp of change. Change is inevitable, but I think this idea of the traditional way we've been doing agriculture is going to it's it can't be sustained. The capital requirements to farm is crazy. I can't go out and buy thousands of acres because I just can't cash flow it. I don't have the collateral to do it. So I'm going to have to look at either working with other farmers to do some of this stuff, or actually working with investors. Whether it's a bad word or not, I don't know. But the model we have isn't going to work. And I guess for me, I prefer a method of working with other farmers to achieve a similar goal or a similar why, to do growth that way. So I think we're going to have to change. Those that are willing to change are going to be the ones that are successful, and those don't will enjoy the time they have in the industry, which could be for a while yet. But I think those ones that are going to really take off and shine are the ones that are going to do it different.
Now, Douglas has a question here. He says, well, comment. He says, individualism is what makes farming unique as an industry. This is, of course, his opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Every farmer does something different, which I think is an advantage. Would you say, now, if you look kind of at more of a collaboration model, what were some of the downfalls of collaboration? Did you really see any?
The only time I ran into downfalls with a collaboration really is when you lost trust within the system of a collaboration. So when I look at collaborations, it's made up of two things. One is the human element, which I call is the people part. So you need trust, you need like-minded people, you need a common why, you need a goal that you all can agree on, what you're trying to achieve with the collaboration. And then on the flip side is you need structure. And I don't care how big or small the collaboration is, whether it's a peer group of 6 people, you need the human side figured out. You need the structure. You need a way to measure success out of this. I think to Doug's point is that, yeah, I think the every way of doing things differently is awesome. And I think being individualistic is awesome. But imagine if you put 2 people together and you both have different skill sets. I think that's what shines about a collaboration is that I don't want a copy of 4 Marks in a collaboration. I want a Mark, I want a Jeff, I want a Sandy, I want other people that all have these different skill sets, different approaches. And you can still be an individual. You can still think differently and do things differently, but that's the advantage of putting more people in the room in a collaboration to overcome some of those barriers that you can't do because you don't have the skill set to do it.
Yep, absolutely. So if somebody's watching this and they're you mentioned how they can be or what they can do to kind of go through the process of becoming a Nuffield scholar, but do you have any recommendations for anyone that might be looking at doing this journey once, of course, the world opens up?
You know what? The advice I have for anyone that's in agriculture is step outside your bubble, step out your geographic comfort zone, travel Canada, find farmers in Western Canada if you're from Ontario or Eastern Canada. You know, travel. You know, if you're really interested and passionate about a topic related to agriculture and the idea of traveling the world and meeting with a whole bunch of really intelligent people, because the best thing about the Nuffield, I guess, scholarship is that you have a network of people across the world that if I'm trying to find a topic, I can reach out to a scholar I know and they can find people that I can talk to. So that's the real advantage of a Nuffield scholarship is that, you know, you can take a topic that you're interested in and passionate about and do it and have a network that can support that across the world. But if you're not comfortable doing a report, just travel, get outside your bubble and experience the world. And I think you'll appreciate the opportunity of doing that and how that actually changes your approach and broadens your horizons.
Absolutely. And was the network within that field at like any age, was it all sorts of people that were a part of it?
They have a soft age limit of I think 45 maybe, but it's pretty soft. And I think the only thing on the younger side is they want a little bit of life experience. You know, probably mid 20s would be kind of a starting point. So, couple fall downs and pick yourself back up kind of experiences in life to kind of get you rooted a little bit. But yeah, so as I said, Nuffield.ca is a great place if you're interested to take a look.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your time, Mark.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for the opportunity to chat about it.
Yeah, you bet. And thanks everyone for your comments today. It's great to have you along for the ride, as I always say. So, appreciate you guys being here, whether you're live or you're watching later. Thank you very much. And be sure to tune in once again, Monday through Friday. We are live. Tune in tonight on The Agronomist. Host Sean Haney will be there at 6 p.m. Mountain or 8 p.m. Eastern, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Twitch. Join in, and that'll be another fun one. But yeah, as I said, RealAg Live Monday to Friday. We are here, same time, same place. So tune in. Thank you very much, and thanks for getting real and getting connected.